everybody, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Gutierrez. I'm a research associate here at the Urban Institute, and with me and co-hosting this event is Kristen Black, senior research associate, also at Urban. And thought we'd just go ahead and dive in. We've got an hour today to talk about our new estimate that we've put together and made available via the education data portal. So to take care of a few housekeeping items, today is being recorded, and the recording will be posted online afterward. Hide captions or adjust settings with the live transcript button, which I believe is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. All participants are muted. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentation. There will be a Q&A session that Kristen and I will then answer your questions, or if it's something quick, we might address it on the spur of the moment. And then if you wouldn't mind, please completing the survey that we're going to post at the end of the event. And so with that, I think we're just going to dive right in. So what I just gave was our brief introduction, the presentation about the goal of MEPS, how we created it, the whole construction of it, what it looks like in the end. That's going to take about 30 minutes. And then there's a questions Q&A, like I mentioned, 10 minutes after that. We're going to spend the last 15 minutes going over how to access MEPS, and whether that be through the full API version of the education data portal, but the way that we're going to walk you through to sort of the point and click aspect of the data portal. So for years, policymakers have used the share of students certified eligible for free and reduced price lunch or meals, we might call FERPL, during this presentation. And they use that as a proxy for the share of low-income students at schools, not necessarily because it's a great measure of poverty for students, but because it has existed thanks to the National School Lunch Program. So, however, the relatively recent adoption of universal free meal programs, such as community eligibility provision, has given schools a lot of options for reporting their share of low-income students. And that in and of itself is making it more difficult to consistently measure student poverty within and across states and across time. For example, some states report the share of students that are directly certified for subsidized meals due to their household participation in social safety net programs. However, those can vary by state as well. And FERPL indirect certification assesses different eligibility at different poverty thresholds and within different populations. So to give you an idea of what this might look like, this orange line here is representative of the share of free and reduced price meal students that are qualified for free and reduced price meals based on the American Community Survey. And we see starting in 2011, 2012, when community eligibility provision came up, or at least the pilot did, those are those gray indicators, vertical lines. We're going to compare that to the percent of FERPL eligible students according to this Common Core data, or the CCD. And we see it tracks relatively well early on in the 2000s. And then sort of, especially in the early 2010s, you see this sort of divergence. So the Common Core data is showing higher shares of free or reduced price lunch students than what we might normally expect from the American Community Survey. So we created model estimates of poverty in schools, or MEPS, and that is going to be for the years 2013 and 2018. The goal here was to create a publicly available data set that could be used by anyone who wants access to it, to create a school level measure of the share of students in poverty that's comparable across states and time, while reflecting as closely as possible the population of students that actually attend each school. We're going to use that. We're going to do that by using a linear mixed effects model to identify district level relationships between the share of free lunch or directly certified students and the students living at or below the federal poverty line. So something I want to make very clear is MEPS is a different threshold of poverty than what we might normally be used to in the education literature. However, we do believe it is an important threshold for poverty, because students in deep or persistent poverty tend to fare worse than even their higher income peers. So we use the estimated parameters of this model to predict at the school level poverty measures. The data that we use to create MEPS is data from the school level, the district level, as well as the state level. So school level data includes data from the Common Core of Data via Urban's education data portal, including the number of free lunch students, number of directly certified students, things like enrollment, whether or not the school is a magnet or charter status, and Title I indicators, as well as grades served. And we also include the NCES Edge school neighborhood poverty measure, or the income poverty ratio in our model as well. At the district level, we're going to use the share of students aged 5 to 17 living at or below the federal poverty line. So again, that 100% threshold. We also use ACS public use microdata areas, or PUMAs, to get the share of non-public school students and K-12 student populations. Again, trying to get at the students that actually attend each of these schools. Lastly, we are going to use Education Data Portal and NCES geographic LEIDs in order to capture charter schools that would normally be included in the typical LEIDs, and then state level information on participation in Medicaid direct certification demonstration projects. We have the sample of schools that we use to estimate MEPS is going to include all open non-virtual schools, including K through 12 grades in all 50 states, plus DC, that report free lunch or direct certification data. So all of the data I just described at the school level is going to be aggregated to the district level using their geographic LEIDs. And then because the CCD began collecting direct certification data in 2016, schools could choose to submit their free lunch or just direct certification numbers, or both in any given year. So there's going to be sort of two samples that we use to create MEPS. It's going to be the free lunch model, or the free lunch sample, and then there's the direct certification model. The free lunch model, it includes states where at least 90% of districts report free lunch data for at least 90% of their students. And that's data is going to be available from 2013 through 2018. However, the number of states used each year, sort of as we might expect, but the adoption of community eligibility provisions is starting to decline over that time. Direct certification data is only available 2016 through 2018, and 19, 21, and 23 states are used in those years respectively. And I'm going to pass it over to Kristen.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. Hi, everyone. Just again, my name is Kristen Blagg. I'm a Senior Research Associate here at the Urban Institute. And I'm going to dive a little bit further into the methodology. And if you're seeing Greek and you're getting scared, don't worry. Following this is a sort of graphical representation of how we're doing it. But for folks that are familiar with linear mixed effects models, we're using it a little differently than how folks would typically use it. So typically you think about running an estimate for a student and then grouping that student nesting in a classroom, and then that classroom nesting in a school, and kind of having the student be the base of the analysis. In this case, we're going about it a bit differently. So we're thinking about creating a relationship at the district level by state. So in this case, the relationship between the share of students in each district within each state at or below 100% of the poverty line, relative to the share of students in each district within each state that are eligible for free lunch or are directly certified for free lunch. So this is the Greek. So we take that and we also incorporate that vector of district characteristics that Emily mentioned earlier, such as whether the school itself, the share of schools in that district are Title I participating schools, as a way of building our model. So it's not to freak you out too much, we're going to go and I'm going to show you this a bit more directly. So this is a simplified version of how our linear mixed effects model works. So again, we're just identifying the relationship between district level free lunch for direct certification shares and poverty, and then we're applying that relationship to the school level data. So in this very simplified version of the world, we have one state and two districts, a square district and a Pentagon district. And we know within the square district, we have 3 schools where there's 10, 30, and 30% share of students eligible for free meals. In the Pentagon district, we have 2 schools and they're at 50% and 70%. So we can take that free meal share and we can start to compare to the federal poverty level. So we know at the district level, 10% of students in the square district are below 100% of the federal poverty level and 30% of the Pentagon. And when we aggregate up these school level averages, we have 20% eligible for free meals in the square and 60% eligible in the Pentagon. So we start to have a ratio at the district level. So here, the ratio between students eligible for free meals and students in poverty is 2 to 1. So what we're doing, we have those other control variables, but broadly we're getting this slope between those two relationships. And because of that, we can then calculate at the school level the share of students below the federal poverty line. So here it's a very simple relationship. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. We do it for each of those. We're predicting forward off of the free meals eligibility at the school level. Now, when we implement this, one of the things we are really concerned about is, we're building an estimate. We put it in there twice, model estimates of poverty in schools. And models do have a certain amount of error. And we wanted to understand whether that error was systemically correlated with other school or district characteristics. So one of the ways that we did that was we looked at the aggregate share of students estimated to be below the poverty level at the district level, relative to what we might call our true value, the students that were identified in the SAPI data. And we compared, what our estimate was to the SAPI data along other district dimensions, such as race and ethnicity, share of English language learners, urbanicity, and district size. The good news is that we weren't too far off in those categories. The bad news is that we were finding some substantial bias by race. So when we were looking at this estimate, we found that the difference between having a Black share of students in a district at 0 and a Black share at 100% meant an underprediction through our model of 7 percentage points. So broadly, we were slightly over-predicting poverty in districts with large shares of white students, and our model was under-predicting for Black students. We poked around a lot to try to figure out why this might be. Maybe there was a covariate in our model that was affecting things, but we weren't finding too much until we thought about broadly the underlying distribution of our data, which I'll talk about now. So the bias, we think, emerges from an underlying assumption in our model. And the underlying assumption is that the distribution of students at different federal poverty thresholds is going to be relatively consistent across different types of schools and districts. What we find when we're looking at American Community Survey data is that Black students are overrepresented among students who are from households in deep poverty. And therefore, when we're looking at districts with large shares of Black students, we are systemically, our model is under-predicting for those students. As you might expect, we're happy that it's not doing this in other areas, but this is a deep concern for us, and has led us to a different measure that we provide in addition to the what we call the original or model-based measure, and that is the modified MEPS. So again, our model-based estimates don't exactly align with the true district share of students below the federal poverty level. And because it's an estimate, we'd be really surprised if it did. We'd be really surprised if we got on the money. But to account for this bias, we created a second measure called modified MEPS that mechanically aligns with the safety poverty measure. So for districts that are under or over predicted, we actually mechanically align back so that we better match the safety poverty measure. So what does this look like? So here we have, our safety poverty measure for these two districts, so the square and the Pentagon, 10% and 30% at the district level. And then we have our predictions, which are 7, 12, and 17, 23, and 33. What this gives us is a slight, if we aggregate these numbers up, it's a slight overestimate for square and a slight underestimate for Pentagon relative to our true values. So to adjust for that, we actually just sort of mechanically move all the school share up or down. So for the square district, we're 2 percentage points off. So we move everyone 2 percentage points down from where our model estimate says that they should be. And for the Pentagon district, we move everyone 2 percentage points up. And this gives you a little bit of a sense of how these estimates end up aligning with the other estimates that we have around poverty. So original MEPS hits right at about 20% of poverty in 2013. And the modified MEPS is slightly higher than that. And then when we look at the safety measure, it mechanically almost exactly aligns with the modified MEPS because we've made it do that. With the original MEPS, you see we're slightly underestimate relative to the safety measure. The American Community Survey is in part based off of the safety measure, but it's sort of in line with our estimates for the share of students below 100% of the federal poverty level. Free lunch is a different threshold, as Emily said earlier, and that's why we do see the free lunch and the direct certification shares being substantially higher than our MEPS estimates. And again, that is a broad caution that we have with MEPS, is that it's a deeper measure of poverty than the free lunch or the direct certification estimate is. And in addition, just to give you a sense of how these results shake out at a state level, this is, I'll just move it around so I can see the axis here. This is the statewide poverty estimate and how our aggregated school level measure, aggregated all the way up to the state, performs relative to the state level poverty rate. So in most cases, we're 1, 2, 3 percentage points off, but in a couple of places, particularly here in DC, we're a bit farther off. And this, I think, speaks to one of the places where, when original MEPS might be valid versus when modified MEPS might be valid. We provide more guidance on this in our documentation, but we feel that original MEPS is valid especially when you're looking at many small districts. But when you're looking at particularly larger districts, districts with a lot of population, you will want to be looking at the modified MEPS because the safety estimates are more precise. And I think we'll also get into that later. I'll just show you the next slide with the other states and the sort of relative closeness between the safety estimate and our model.
That was on me.
Yeah.
I'm over here.
And I'm going to pass it over to Emily to talk a little bit more about what this looks like state by state over time.
Yeah, so I'm going to circle back to sort of the inconsistencies of FERPL over time and compare it to our MEPS measure to give you a sense of state-specific instances, as well as to remind us that the threshold's different than what we are usually used to. So here we have California, Florida, New York, and Texas. California and Florida are relatively consistent with their FERPL measures. But when we look at New York and Texas, those numbers, this is again aggregated to the state level, are pretty volatile. So up and down in New York, there's sort of this swooping slope that's happening in Texas when it comes to FERPL compared to MEPS, which is the blue line that is relatively consistent across. But to dive down a little bit deeper, I'm showing you some school-specific instances within each of the states that I just showed you. So even though California and Florida had relatively stable FERPL at the state level, for example, McKinley Elementary in California has a pretty big dip in FERPL in 2016. DeSoto County High School has a large dip in 2017 in Florida. There's FERPL sort of all over the place with the New York and the Texas example. And while MEPS uses FERPL as part of the model to estimate school poverty, it's a smoother, a little bit more consistent measure across time compared to what you might get with free and reduced price lunch. We were given the opportunity to make sure MEPS was valid with real school level or individual student level data. So we were able to work with Spiegel, Clark, Domina, and Radsky on their project, or work with them on measuring school level poverty and exercise and convergent validity. So their goal was to figure out how well do existing and newly constructed measures of school poverty or capture school poverty, excuse me. So they created this gold standard using Oregon data, including school identifiers from the State Education Department and IRS data and SNAP data. And they defined the gold standard by the share of students enrolled in SNAP or with documented family incomes below 185% of the federal poverty line. So we linked them our data and our MEPS that we had estimated, and an early version that they were able to compare to their data showed that MEPS was highly correlated at 0.92 with the gold standard. So another thing that we learned, kind of harking back to what Kristen mentioned, was that context here matters. And so circumstances where SAPI is more reliable, so districts in large settings or larger populations with less error, modified MEPS is going to be more appropriate. However, if you're considering looking at districts across the US, both big and small, we suggest that original MEPS is more appropriate, since the estimations from the models are further refining those predictions. So we're about to get into some Q&A and and an explanation of how to access the data. This data is available to you for immediate download, which we're going to show you here in a second, including original MEPS and the standard errors produced from the data output, including annual and weighted percentiles, so rankings of those schools by each year, as well as modified MEPS, including the annual and weighted percentiles as well. We want to be very clear about the uses and misuses of MEPS. So the goal here is to compare school, or be used in school level research across states and time. For example, examining school level relationships between state test scores and student populations over time. It is not appropriate for allocating resources within states or districts. States and districts have very specific ways of doing that are specific to their populations and the way that they have things structured there. So this is not a take out your FERPL, put in MEPS scenario by any means, but more to be able to compare across time the school poverty measures. And with that, I think we've moved on to questions.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a couple of questions here, and I think so Vitali asks again, why can't MEPS be used for allocating resources? And I think we can just expand a little bit more, Emily, but broadly, you know, what we've built here is an estimate built on national data and a model. And when we're thinking about a state or a district, you know, looking at providing money or providing extra resources to some schools over others, we think it's inappropriate for a model which is trying to, you know, where the aim is really to harmonize across states and harmonize across time, to be used instead of data that's much closer to the actual school and district. So actual counts of students in school that are eligible for free lunch or that are directly certified are going to have more validity in that context than this model estimate, which is really trying to strike this balance between you know, using data that's available on schools, but also harmonizing across all of these other different parameters. Emily, anything else you wanted to say on that one?
No, I think that covers what I would have said.
And then Joseph asks about what accounts for Tennessee's measures being so close. Was Tennessee one of your states, or I think it must have been in the
it's in the state, I think at the state level comparison of all 50 states.
Yeah, and I see that looks like Tennessee was within one percentage point or so of the actual true safety estimate. I think from our model, if there are lots of reasons why that could be the case, I think broadly we see that states with larger districts, larger populations generally have more accurate safety estimates. So that might be one reason if we're looking at, I think Tennessee is a county level district state. So you have lots of larger districts. But there could be other reasons, you know, using the NCES neighborhood poverty measure. If most students go to a school that's very close to where they live, that could make the estimate better. There are lots of potential possibilities for why Tennessee is looking good in our model relative to other states. Emily, anything else?
No, that covers it from our perspective too. Mm-hmm. Ben Taft is asking, how can we use this prediction when we don't know safety? And I think that's true. You can use this prediction when we don't know safety, right? We use safety at the district level to predict at the school level. Again, these are going to be estimates. And so what could be done if for whatever reason there's not a safety estimate for a district, you could use the school level estimates and then aggregate up based on school enrollment and waiting on school enrollment to get sort of an aggregated estimated MEPS at the district level. Anything to add there, Kristen?
Oh, I think that's right. And somebody just actually voted for Chris's question, so I think we can tackle it next. So I think this is a great one, asking about, is MEPS positioned as something different than other poverty measures, such as safety or share enrolled in SNAP, or another estimate of the same thing? So I think it's about the unit of analysis that we're looking at. So the safety values are only available at the geographic district level. And what we found was a need for a school level estimate that was not a free lunch measure or a direct certification measure, because the programs used for direct certification vary by state. And then when schools are enrolled in provisions that provide universal school meals, the free lunch share measure can be a little inconsistent in terms of how states or districts report. So this is a model-based estimate that attempts to essentially build a CP style measure for each individual school based off of the other data that we have for the school.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when possible, adjusting for the share of students in the district that are enrolled in public schools. So a little tweak difference there.
Orlando makes a good point about the American Community Survey. So the American Community Survey is one of the data sets that informs the SAPE analysis. So his point is that the American Community Survey oversamples low-income areas because response rates are low, and that could be affecting the undercounting in urban areas. I guess this is relative to what we're finding with, it's kind of, this point informs a few different aspects of our analysis. It might inform our bias analysis, which is based on SAPE data, but also based on data from the Common Core. And lower income respondents to the American Community Survey, actually the higher income households among those low income respondents. So, so the reason why we use SAPE is because it is also sort of informed by other data sources besides the ACS. So we hope as much as possible this census-built product corrects for some of those imbalances around who's responding to the survey. But I take your point, Orlando, that we're only as good as our data, and what we're trying to do is triangulate a new measure based off of available data that we have. And Emily, I don't know if you have other things that are sort of coming out from the comment Orlando has.
No, I think it's a great comment though, and I think it does, like you said, apply to a few different areas of the analysis that we provided. I think, so Samantha is asking, I believe you said this estimate is for 2018. When will more recent information be available? That is a great question. We are trying to figure out how to even improve on the MEPS methodology that we already have, as well as provide more data for more recent years. We think it's going to be great to use what we've learned from the 2013 to 2018 process and the volatility of FERPL, even during that time period, to use that and the lessons learned there to apply to what is going to happen to the FERPL data during the pandemic years and school closure years. So we're really eager to improve upon it. I cannot give a date though for when that data will be more available.
And I like Joseph's question, which I think will also lead into our discussion of actually using these data. What actions can I ask people to take based off of these statistics? Can I expect that Board of Education members or county commissioners will understand them? So our goal was to build a measure that would be understandable. So it's a share of students that are estimated to be below the federal poverty threshold for each school in the U.S. One of the things that is very valuable about this measure is for comparison across states and over time. So when school county commissioners or school board members want to understand how demographics may have changed within individual schools, they might, if they were looking at some of the data that Emily presented earlier, they might be really surprised to see that their free lunch measures have kind of yo-yoed between these different years. And the MEPS measure helps smooth that estimate and show a broader trajectory over time of an increase in poverty or a decrease in poverty. We also know that sometimes, particularly state policymakers, are interested in comparisons with nearby states. And this allows for a more feasible comparison at the school level of performance, because the free lunch reporting or the direct certification programs that are used may vary across states.
Yeah, and sort of to add to that, just making sure that, and I think in this area, folks are really used to the 185% threshold. And so, if they're used to a school having 80% free reduced price lunch, and then they look at MEPS measure, which is going to be considerably lower because it is the share of students below 100% of the federal poverty line. Just making sure that that connection is, it's not just a drastic drop in poverty, but it's actually a measure of deeper poverty. And so I think people are totally able to understand that, but do need that context, especially given how much purple has been used up until this point and will probably continue to be used. I don't see any questions from Michael. So did you see any questions, Kristen, from Michael?
I didn't see anything else.
Okay.
If there's one here.
Yeah.
So we have a question. Can you share a little bit more about the study data seen in California in comparison to the dips seen in specific regions?
In specific regions, meaning multiple states across, or regions of the US, I'm assuming. I think that's going to lend itself to states that are making different decisions about what data is provided to the Common Core, whether that's a state that a lot of schools are adopting community eligibility provision, if it's a state that has a really high uptake there, then and also whether or not schools have a pretty big incentive to still account for reduced price lunch, for example, in their funding formulas. So some states that is a very big reason to collect those forms, and other states not so much. So there are different incentives for schools to collect different information. There are different contexts, whether they're just participating in the traditional National School Lunch Program or in universal free meal programs. And so that's going to impact the data that's reported to the Common Core. Some states have, like you said, in California, have relatively consistent data across time, at least at the state level, when you look at the state level, but other states are just going to have a little bit different contexts and incentives and implications.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I think, we have this broader question about the use of MEPS, whether MEPS would not be appropriate for in-state comparisons or for smaller comparisons such as wards in DC. I think it in part depends on, as we said, like the context you're coming from. So if you are an academic researcher who's looking for something, some way to group schools consistently across time, that would help with an in-state comparison, because some states have switched from reporting free lunch to direct certification, and those measures don't align in a way that's easily sort of transferable across different years. So we think that those types of across time analyses are particularly apt within state. But one of the things we want to emphasize is that if policymakers are looking for a way to allocate resources or funding or better understand a specific school, this is a model estimate. It is useful for sort of taking a broader step back, but for allocating resources, we think that policymakers need to use the data that's available, or think more broadly about finding ways to make the data more consistent across time. So, perhaps moving from a free lunch to a direct certification measure, or incorporating other data around the context of the school to help with those decisions. But it should be the actual counts of students in the school rather than what pops out of our fancy model. And I like what Joseph just surfaced, these questions around helping reduce the poverty rate and help children living in poverty. I think these are really important questions, because what our data are designed to do are to help better understand the context of schools, and help show where policy can do better to serve these different students. So we hope that this would draw more attention to the needs of schools, and drive more resources to students in poverty eventually, although with different measures than this one. This one is more of an academic measure, more of an estimate, but is designed to help, again, look at differences across states and over time to allow for better comparisons of different state policies or the impact of different policies over time. Emily, did you have anything to add to that one? I think it's a really important question.
I think we just saw that there was this gap in the information that we had about schools, and there's a lot of unknown in terms of school poverty, and it can, differences in FERPL and differences in direct certification. We could understand those a little bit, but still didn't have a way to talk about them on a level playing field. And so that was the reason for creating this. And so now that it's there, we're hoping that others can look at these numbers as well and see where schools are in most need, being able to compare across time and across states. So the numbers in and of themselves are hopefully going to be able to spur those conversations and spur the policy making that will eventually help to reduce that poverty rate and to help those students who need it most.
Mm-hmm. And as my work sort of traverses both K-12 and higher ed, I really like this question about, can federal financial aid for college be used to inform this measure or vice versa? That's a great idea, and I think really helpful for especially the high school portion of our study. But we know that not everyone who leaves high school applies for federal financial aid in higher education. Some states do require it, so that's an important aspect of this. But that is the one time that we get parents to provide substantial financial information is when their students are preparing to go to college. I think it's an important thing for us to look at when we're thinking about maybe validating this measure against other data sources, although I don't know whether we can get too much on federal financial aid at the maybe we could get it from a state longitudinal data set, I'm not sure. And then whether these measures can actually inform financial aid, I think they provide very important information around the context of a school and maybe a slightly more comparable information across states. So maybe a college might be able to use that data, but I don't think it would be appropriate to use it in a federal financial aid context specifically. And we already know that the financial aid application is going to be substantially simplified in the coming years, and that I think will also eliminate the need for other data sets to inform that.
So I think we have like one more room in here for one more, or at least addressing a comment in here, and then we're going to move on to showing you guys how to access the data. So just to say, from Orlando, if states provide free meals to all students, then the problem goes away. In my mind, yes and no. Right, there's still data that's going to be collected, and if some states are adopting universal free meals and others aren't, then we're sort of just perpetuating the data issue of free and reduced price lunch applications not being turned in, and then not being able to compare those across time or states, and similarly, direct certification also, depending on the state, uses different programs to make students eligible or not. So yes and no, I guess is my response.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're going to move on to the MEPS application and access piece. And here we're going to reiterate one more time before you download this data, the uses and misuses. So if you're interested in comparing a school in Florida to a school in New York State, this is your data set. You want to compare or examine school level relationships between state test scores and student populations, poverty levels across states and time, but again, not appropriate for plugging into funding formulas by any means. So I am going to take the URL and I'm going to pop it into the chat so that if you have the ability, you can follow along with us as I take you through the point and click scenario here. So there you have it in the chat. And And so if you click that link that I just placed in the chat, you will see this website come up. You'll see education data at your fingertips. And in order to get started, we will click the Get Started button indicated here by this nice large pink arrow. Once you have clicked the Get Started icon, and I'm sorry, feel free to talk in the chat. If you have questions, if we're going too fast, if you missed a slide, something along those lines, feel free to throw that in there, and hopefully Kristen can help you out as I'm walking through these slides. So you have now clicked the Get Started button. Again, this is also available strictly from the full API standpoint using education data command and stata and Python R commands as well, but this will download the CSV file for you. So we're going to click the K-12 education icon because this is for K-12 schools. And because it's for K-12 schools and not districts, you're going to then click on the schools icon on the left, which is going to bring you to the place where you get to choose what state you're interested in downloading data for in the time frame. So here I have chosen Alabama. It was at the top of the list. You can choose more than one state, a few at a time. And then the time frame drop down is going to give you two options. The most recent, which for MEPS is going to be 2018 because that's the most recent year we have for MEPS. And or you can download a date range. So if you want to download all MEPS from 2013 through 2018, which is what I have here, you'll start with 2013 to 2018 and then click the next button. Once you have clicked those buttons, you will be taken to the page that looks like this. On the left-hand side is sort of all of your options for school characteristics that you can get from the education data portal. The first one it brings you to is school characteristics, but in order to get to MEPS, you are going to want to click on the demographics word on the left, like the big pink arrow suggests, which will take you to a page that looks similar to this. So at the top, you have enrollment and student characteristics. And you can either select all or go through and select them and toggle them individually. So what I'm going to walk you through is downloading free and reduced price lunch at the same time as MEPS to be able to kind of have a sense of that. So you're going to need the student enrollment information because the way the Common Core provides you free and reduced price lunch or direct certification is the number of students and not the percentage. So you're going to click yes to enrollment, and then you're going to scroll down and toggle free and reduced price lunch status, as well as poverty estimates. I've chosen just to download the estimated poverty percentage, so just original MEPS, as well as the percentile enrollment of MEPS, or percentile weighted by enrollment, excuse me, of MEPS. Once you hit the next button, you'll get sort of this review of all the information that you have selected. So K-12, 2013, all the schools in Alabama, and all of the demographic characteristics that we've toggled that we would like to download. So enrollment, number of students eligible for free lunch, reduced price lunch, etc. Once you're done reviewing, you will go down and click the Generate Data button at the bottom. And depending how many states you chose and how large that state is, it can take a minute for your data to download. But once it has finished downloading, you'll see these two files in that same page. And so it'll provide the data dictionary. I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment, as well as the CSV. For example, here I'm going to have 9,188 rows. And you can also download them in this zip file below. So depending on, again, the size of the state, the number of years you chose. You may still be waiting on your data if you're kind of going along with me in your own browser. But I will show you here, this is what you'll see for the data dictionary. So there's the variable name, the years that it's available for, the label, as well as the description and the source. So you can see on the source all this other information about the school name, location, LEA name, number of students eligible for free lunch. All of that's going to come from the Common Core that you can pull at the same time as the model estimates of poverty in schools or MEPS source. There we are. So this is the CSV of the data that I was able to download for Alabama. So it starts with 2018, but within this our CSV, it provides all of the years that we requested 2013 through 2018. And we have, enrollment, free lunch, reduced price lunch, all of that. You would have to make those free lunch percentages yourself using the enrollment numbers, but notice that MEPS is already going to be a percentage for you, such as 28%. And then the last variable here in O is going to be the percentile, so that schools rank nationally in terms of poverty according to MEPS. So the 88th percentile, et cetera. And if there are no questions, I think we're headed to, well, I guess this is the questions. Do we have any questions that we can answer about accessing the data?
We had a quick question about whether this could be aggregated to the district level. And the answer is yes, it can be, and that could help you with the original MEPS understand what the bias looks like in your own district. But because it is built off of the district level safety estimates, if you were looking for a share of students below poverty, you'd want the original data. And modified MEPS should actually directly correlate with the safety estimate in most cases. Great, and I don't see any other questions.
I don't either. But I do think we want to do a plug for the survey that has been put into the chat. If you don't mind, that helps us out a lot. Taking our event survey, I don't think it takes long at all.
Yeah, as we come up on the 4 o'clock hour, we don't have any more questions, I think. Just thank you all for your attention on this somewhat nerdy topic, but very important topic of trying to get better estimates of school level student poverty. It's a question that's weighing on a lot of folks' minds, and certainly happy to answer any questions offline as well if you want to reach out via Twitter or email.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.